Hello, and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm, brought to you by funkiest.net. This is an interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I'm your faithful host, Scott Dr. Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything is on the One, the First Guide to Funk. You don't have your copy, get on over to Amazon and pick one up. Makes a great gift. Whether you're watching or listening, as always, I thank you very much for your continued interest and support. This episode features drummer Emry Thomas, who served as Johnny Guitar Watson's right-hand man during the bluesman's mid-1970s renaissance as a leading R&B and funk act. Thomas, who cut his teeth as a professional musician playing early gigs in his home state of Texas with the likes of Etta James and Patti LaBelle, was a core member of the early 1970s progressive soul band Maxayn. That's when he first connected with Watson. That group, which released 3 of its own excellent albums between 1972 and 1974, which were recently re-released as a CD set earlier this year. They backed Watson when he ended a 6-year recording hiatus in 1973 with a traditional R&B album called Listen, and its slightly funkier follow-up called I Don't Want to Be a Lone Stranger. A change in label found Watson adopting a pimped-out image and fully embracing funk, with Thomas being the only Maxayn member tagging along for the ride. Watson and Thomas became essentially a two-man operation in the studio and churned out some of the era's finest funk records. That run began in 1976 and included the albums Ain't That a Bitch, A Real Mutha for Ya, Funk Beyond the Call of Duty, Giant, What the Hell Is This, and Love Jones. But perhaps the funkiest albums of them all were the 2 that Watson, Thomas, and some cohorts released under the backing band's name, the Watsonian Institute. 2 records were released under that moniker: The Amazing Master Funk in 1978, and a year later, the still potent Extra Disco Perception. Those scarce records are a must for any funk or Watson fan. Among the 7 top 40 R&B hits and other notable tracks Watson notched between 1975 and 1980 were I Don't Want to Be a Lone Ranger, I Need It, Ain't That a Bitch, Superman Lover, his biggest hit and my personal favorite, A Real Mutha for Ya, Lover Jones, the remake of his classic, his blues classic, that is, Gangster of Love, Love Jones, and Telephone Bill. Watson, who began his recording career all the way back in the mid-1950s, was a gifted multi-instrumentalist who landed another 4 top 10 R&B hits between 1955 and 1968. Ego, drugs, and bad record deals got the best of Watson in the early 1980s, and he and Thomas went their separate ways. Watson would go on to release a handful of additional albums and send a few more singles to the upper reaches of the R&B charts. By upper reaches, I mean low on the charts, 50 and higher. But he never again regained the tunefulness or success that he had realized with Thomas. Watson died on stage of a heart attack during a show in Japan in 1996 at the age of 61. Thomas went on to perform in a funk group called Extreme and with other musicians, and continues to do so today. In this in-depth interview, the irrepressible and outspoken Thomas shines the light on both the tragically little-known Maxayn and the fierce and enigmatic Johnny Guitar Watson. From the tale of how he first connected with Watson to how he disconnected with him to how he reconnected with him shortly before his death, Thomas pulls no punches in talking about drum attacks, killer tracks, and serious setbacks. So sit back and dig as E.T. phones home to Truth and Rhythm to set the record straight. Welcome once again to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership, where today I'm joined by one of the premier funk drummers of the 1970s, Mr. Emry Thomas. He not only was the central member of Johnny Guitar Watson's Funk Master works, but also prior to that, a core member of the equally fantastic but lesser known R&B group known as Maxayn. E.T., how are you? Welcome.
I'm fine, Scott. Thank you ever so much for having me in your studio today, man. I really appreciate your interest.
Oh, man, very interested. I'm so honored to have you. I mean, the great stuff that you did, we'll get into it, but it's a thrill to get to talk to you today, believe me.
As I said, I really appreciate the interest, sir.
And you're coming to us from Los Angeles today, correct?
We're coming from high atop UCLA. Yes, we're here on the campus of UCLA.
That's fantastic. As we spoke off air, I actually went to UCLA for a while and I used to live out there. So I grew up working in Westwood, so I know it very, very well.
Outstanding, outstanding.
Yeah, go Bruins, right?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we've had a very good week. Uh, Overall, it's kind of we're in a rebuilding process overall. But as I said earlier, we did beat USC, so that is a very very good vibe over here at UCLA. And to the extent it's hey, that made our week. As a matter of fact.
Yeah, no question, man. That's a huge win. Um, but man, I've been a fan ever since hearing, well, a huge fan. I mean, I was a fan ever since hearing some of the Ain't That a Bitch stuff, but really, we'll talk about it more. But I just want to let you know and give you a sense and give viewers a sense of when I first really got into what y'all were doing, and that was with A Real Mother for You. That just changed it all back in '77, and still to this day. I mean, I never get tired of hearing that groove.
Well, that was one of Watson's specials. He John Watson was a visionary. To extent like I don't know if you are into astrology and all, but I'm into astrology. I'm Cancer the Crab. Johnny Watson was Aquarius, and the water bearer. And the crab got to have water. And I tell people this story regarding my association with Watson and other individuals of that sign, you know, Aquarius. As I said, the water bearers, all right, and the crab has to have water. As a young kid, as a young boy, my uncle, my first jazz record, it got me interested in, say, uh, in jazz. It was a record with, wow, God, it's a saxophonist, Art Pepper, as it was, and uh, it was Max Roach, as a matter of fact. And I remember this record. It was during, as a matter of fact, it was during this period of the year. As a matter of fact, because it was right about Thanksgiving, and my uncle lived in Houston, and I was living in Texas City, Texas, which is the mainland of Galveston. All right, and we were visiting, and as I said, my uncle played me this record, and Max Roach took this incredible drum solo. And the deal was, I told my uncle that if I could have that record, and he told me, I tell you what, if you go back and you make some A's, the next time you come back, you can have that record. I made some A's, and he gave me that record, you know. And as I said, that record was pretty much what say sparked me as far as jazz and listening to say someone like Max, because Max was old school, but Max was one of the old school conservatory drummers too. And he was classically taught, you know. Whereas a lot of the older guys, they would say self-taught musicians and all, and they played a certain way. And as I said, Max was one of those guys that were trained properly. So he was, as I said, he was smooth, you know. And as I said, that kind of turned me on. And my uncle was an Aquarius. All right. So my first encounter as far as dealing with music came from my uncle, who was this Aquarius. All right. And all right, when I started to pursue music as a young man, when I was like, say, 13, I met another individual. His name was James Wilson. All right. He was one of my first band directors. And he was an Aquarius. And he was the individual that was very instrumental in me playing the drums. I wanted to play trumpet. And when Mr. Wilson came to our school, he had just arrived, and he was recruiting individuals to be a part of the band. And as I said, I wanted to play a brass instrument. And by the time I had gotten there, all of the brass instruments were taken. And Mr. Wilson said, well, I'm sorry. I don't need any more brass instruments, but I do need drummers, you know. And I told him, I said, well, I was bummed out. I said, man, well, I can already play drums. And he looked at me and, what do you mean you can already play drums? Meaning that I had a sense of what that instrument was about because I had a neighbor who was in the band who played drums, and I used to watch him practice. And I used to pick up things, natural things like buzzing the drumsticks to make to play a press roll. So there was things that I had a natural gift, to say deal with that instrument. And Mr. Wilson identified with that. He saw that. He asked me to show him that I could play, and I played him a role. It blew him away. And so he took me home. He took me home to my mother and said, yo, you need to buy him some drums. All right. And my mother was reluctant, because my mother had bought my older sister, a piano because my mom loved the piano and she wanted my sister to play. So she bought her a piano. She took a few lessons, but then she lost interest. And consequently, because she lost interest, my mom was assuming that, hey, I would do the same thing. And it really pissed me off. And the deal was, I told my mom, well, why would you punish me because of what my sister's? And she said, well, I'll tell you what, if you get you a job this summer, I'll help you get you a set of drums. And that summer I got a job working in the pet shop and working with my grandmother, washing dishes in the restaurant. And as I said, I got that set of drums. And once I got that set of drums, believe me, boy, that was it. I did not look back. That started me. And as I said, man, it was something. I didn't have any teachers, not really, to the extent my teacher was Mr. Wilson. He was my first drum teacher, but he was a reed guy. So he had a concept of a drum kit, which was 4 on the floor, 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, 2 and 4 on the snare. So basically that was my first directive as far as playing that instrument. 4 beats on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the hi-hat and the snare, and a ride. So, and as I said, I took it from there and practiced in my mama's living room, and also see, my mom was like, she was reluctant to hear all of that noise. Also, me getting there, shall we say, the practicing and all, and also see, listen, I have my second cousin, my mom's first cousin. Have you ever heard of Charles Brown? You remember Charles Brown?
Sure.
Merry Christmas, baby. You sure look good. That's my cousin. All right, my cousin. He's my second cousin. He's my mom's first cousin. And the deal was her double cousin, all right, from Texas, down off in the bottom, he dig in the country. My 2 brothers married 2 sisters. So they made them double cousins. And my mom was very proud of that when she tells the story about her, because see, I wasn't as wise as a young person, because most young people, you don't hear the blues. I grew up during the James Brown situation. I grew up listening to Jabo and John Starks and Clyde Stubblefield. So that was my motivation. I wanted to be a funketeer. So the blues was not given the proper respect that I should have been given it. And not to mention my cousin being an icon, right? I should have did put that in perspective. So when I first got my recording deal, my first deal with Maxayn, my mom told me, you make sure the first thing you do when you get to California, you find your cousin. That was the last thing I did, Scott. And when I finally met him, he was working in Hollywood at the Center Grill, doing the holiday season, his busiest time of the year, you did. And I'm walking up one of those side streets, heading north towards the boulevard. And the first thing that I hear is, Merry Christmas, baby. And I'm thinking to myself, I said, wow, boy, listen to this. All right. So, and I finally get inside the Center Grill. I meet my cousin, and he was very gracious, and really blew me away because he was reminiscing and all. He started speaking to me like he was speaking to my mom and my father. You see, I'm a junior. All right. And he started talking. I said, wait a minute, cuz, wait a minute, you're getting things mixed up because you think you're talking to the old school. You're speaking to those things that I wasn't aware of that he was talking about. But as I say, he was reminiscing and all, and he was telling me about how growing up with my mom and all. And I was really shocked to find out that when he told me that Johnny Watson had been his opening act as a young Johnny Guitar Watson. Watson had worked with my cousin as his opening act.
Mm.
You know. And my cousin was saying, he said, Watson wouldn't have crossed you the way that he did if he had known that he was my cousin. You know. And I cherish that because, like I said, I wish I could have said got the two of them together. You know, because as I said, that was a plus because, like I said, for sure, uh, at that particular time, my cousin was a big star at that particular point. You know, Charles Brown. Matter of fact, you told me during those days back in the day, there was only two bands that could work in Hollywood back in those days. Two black acts. It was him and Nat King Cole. Same kind of a concept, you know, the piano trio and all. And they were the only two black acts at that period that was allowed to work in Hollywood, you know.
Wow, that's a lot of history right there, man. You went through like 3, 4 of my questions right there, so I appreciate that, Et. I remember you mentioning to me before we got on air about seeing JB and those guys. I mean, what was it like when you first saw Jabo and Stubblefield and those guys? I mean, that really set off a fire inside you. What was that about?
That was my inspiration, Scott. And the deal is, because of that, it's like years later, you know, just recently, doing research. As a matter of fact, there's Fred Wesley, worked with Watson. Excuse me, worked with James Brown. He was the trombonist, as a matter of fact. Worked with James, and at one point he was the leader of the band at one point, and he just did a bibliography, and he told some of the stories of his involvement with James, and to the extent that there were certain similarities in terms of say how those old school guys reacted and related to their musicians. You know, they did things that weren't cool. As a matter of fact, they were some greedy bastards. As a matter of fact, very talented, very creative individuals, but they were greedy. And as I said, some of the things that they did to their musicians was not cool. Uh, I grew up listening to James, as I said, and as I say to people, you know, like, hey, do you think that I was motivated to listen to James because James is this great singer? Listen, James Brown, during the period that I was growing up, James was not Smokey Robinson. James was not David Ruffin. All right. James was not Marvin Gaye. All right. He was not none of them smooth guys. James was raw, rough, funk, dance you to death with all of them funky, funky beats. And that's why I was a fan, because of John Starks, you did, Jabo, and Clyde Stubblefield. And because James was a dancing machine. Not because he was no great damn singer, because he wasn't. He was a character, all right? But as I said, as far as an artist, incredible artist, I'll give him that. Cannot take that from him. It's props. I got to give him that. But when I found out how that asshole did my brothers that recorded Cold Sweat, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, you know, the Funky Drummer, he didn't pay them guys. They
Mhm.
didn't get paid for that. It was like these assholes, he felt as though not only him, he's doing you a favor by allowing you to be a part of his organization. And relating to those periods, we're talking pre-1965, before integration, and also wasn't no real protection for black musicians. You dig? So you were at the mercy of people like James Brown and Ike Turner. You dig? To the extent because these were the stars, they were independents, they ran their companies and all, and they pretty much dictated what policy was. And also, the deal is, you are faced with, as a musician, you quality musician, you're faced with, you can say work with James Brown, or you can work with an Ike and Tina Turner, or you can work with a Johnny Guitar Watson, or you could be a milkman. So what do you think you're gonna choose? You're gonna probably choose what you feel is your calling, to playing that instrument. Now, and back in the day, a milkman was a good job. You dig? If you had to provide for your family, you did. That was a steady job that would allow you to do the kind of things to take care of yourself and raise a family, as opposed to say being out on the road, say haphazardly, working, not working, whatever. But the point is that I'm sure that given a choice, you would rather work with, say, your calling, which being a musician, as opposed to say being the mailman or the milkman. But in the ghetto during those days, those were two quality jobs. Being a mailman and being a milkman, to the extent that as a young man, those were the kind of jobs that you would be looking to try to have, as a matter of fact, because they were dependable. You could count on that kind of a job. So, but as I said, those guys took it upon themselves to, I'm doing you a favor by letting you work with me. You did, and in a way they were, to the extent that they said, hey, you get, if you handle it correctly, because for sure you network, you network and you make your connections and all, and if you're smart and you got the right kind of skills and all, you can move on from that connection, or you can even say start your own career, based upon who you worked with.
No doubt. What would you say though about their approach to drums or their style that really appealed to you?
It was the funk, man. It was the funk, and these guys the research was for me. John Stock Jabo was more of a jazz musician, to the extent he had jazz chops, all right. And Stubblefield was more of a funk blues guy, you did, and it was like those beats, man, that those guys gave their own, their personal, shall we say, their grooves, their energy, the way that they played those instruments. Now, and James was an individual who could identify. He saw things. Matter of fact, imagine I'm Clyde. I'm sitting on the kit. We getting ready to rehearse and all, and everybody ain't there. But I'm sitting on the kit and I'm playing. I'm messing with my axe and all. And I play. Wow, I hit this. I got this funky little groove going on. I got it going on. I'm just playing with my axe. And Mr. Brown walks in. And Mr. Brown say, "Hey man, keep playing that. Keep playing that." And then he hollers at the bass player, "Yeah, come over here." And he gives the bass player some kind of look at it. And the bass player, "Play this, play this, play this." He did. And then, okay, you got that going on. Then he called to get the guitar guy. "Man, play this, play this, play this." Next thing you know, you got a hit fucking record, right? Because he's standing in the middle of his studio. You dig it? His engineer, his soundboard, his recording machine. And as I said, he caught these guys in a moment of, say, creativity. He captures it. Don't give them no fucking credit. You did, but it turns into a hit record. James Brown gets paid. Don't pay them shit. All right. They had to pay for everything. They had to pay for their hotel. They had to pay for their laundry. You dig? And they had to pay. They had to pay for all kinds of shit. Here's an asshole boy that was making $1 million, almost $1 million a month, and he would come up with excuses about why he couldn't pay his band. Now Watson wasn't that cruel, but because Watson did pay for hotels, he did pay for transportation, but there were things that were done.
Oh, hold on. We'll get to that. Before we do, did you play with anyone professionally before Max? And I'm going to talk about Maxayn in a minute, but I wanted to make sure. Did you play with anyone else professionally before them?
I did, but it wasn't a situation where I was connected with them. As a young musician working in Galveston and working in the Dallas area, when I was in high school, I worked with Etta James. Our band was called the Soul Masters. Matter of fact, the guy's name was Marvin Peterson. Marvin Peterson and the Soul Masters. He changed his name. His name is Hannibal now. Hannibal Peterson, he's a trumpet player. All right. And he and we all grew up together. We grew up together as young musicians. We went to, say, elementary school together, junior high school together, and high school together. And we went to college together, and we played music together as young men. And as I said, we had a band called the Soul Masters, and we were the house group for this organization that we used to work for. And Etta James was hired to work that club. So we were the house band. And she came in, and we played our set, and also we're bringing out Miss James. Miss James comes up, and she turns to the group and all, and turns to our guitarist and said, Give me a B flat arpeggio, blotti, blotti, blotti. You dig it? And our guitarist name was Bubba. And Bubba turned around to all of us. He said, "Hey man, just play the blues." But she's all proper. But give me a B flat arpeggio, you dig? And as I said, just play the blues. And as I said, we played, and to the extent that it was successful. To the extent, hey, she had a good show, and as I said, so Etta James. And once I had I was at home, and I went home summer break from North Texas State, another holiday, Thanksgiving. He did going home for the holidays, and there was a Stax review working. He did. We talking about Arthur Conley and a whole bunch of folks. I can't even remember. It's like I tried to find the data, man, but I lost the data. But it was the typical Stax review shows that were going on back in the late '60s. All right, but it was one of those shows. All right, I went to the show. As I said, I'm at home for the holiday. The drummer had got in an accident, and they're going to cancel the show. As I said, we're in a place called the Moody Center in Galveston, out on the beach, and so the house is full. And the announcer comes out and he's saying that, that he's giving everyone, his apologies and all. And of course, we're going to have to cancel the show. But does anyone out there play drums? And I just happened to be standing up there in front. And I said, yeah, I play drums. And the deal was, as I said, I'm in Galveston, all right? And Galveston is across the bridge from Texas City, Texas, which is the mainland. So it'll take me about 15, 20 minutes to go back across the bridge and get my drums and all and come back. So we did that. And I played that show for everybody. No rehearsal, but because I was, aware of all of the current music, I had a sense of, who, for instance, sweet soul music, everybody knew out the country, sweet soul music. As a matter of fact, that was written by Otis Redding and Sam Cooke, as a matter of fact, sweet soul music. So I played that particular show with Arthur Conley and a whole bunch of other artists, all right?
That's some on-the-job training right there.
Absolutely. And then when I went to North Texas State, another situation being the house band. I worked with Hank Crawford. Hank Crawford, jazz saxophonist. Used to work with Ray Charles also, but on his own as a jazz artist, but worked with Hank Crawford, And also, still in Dallas, going to North Texas State. I got my first recording deal with Patti LaBelle and the Bluebell. That was my first professional recording session. And from there, it kind of went, because of what I had done with say, Patti LaBelle and all the people that I worked with, they were impressed enough about what I'd done. So, matter of fact, Andre Lewis, back to Andre Lewis, Andre had left the group that we were working with in Dallas, because he was a part of it. He was a homeboy of Buddy Miles. So he left and he went and worked with Buddy. We're talking about 1968, 69, all right? And when he left Buddy Miles, he formed the group Maxayn. And he called me. I'm still at North Texas. I'm a senior, as a matter of fact. I'm a senior at North Texas State. My mom thought I was crazy. I'm a senior at North Texas State, and I get this opportunity to be a part of that group, So I leave North Texas in my senior year, 1971. And I signed with Capricorn Records, based in Macon, Georgia, with Maxayn.
I'll show these.
Yeah. Yeah. You see, look, you see me on the end. I didn't have a mustache. They had to paint a mustache on me. On the Maxayn Mindful, yeah, on the end, that's Andre next to me. Maxayn is in the middle, and on the other side, that's Marlo Henderson. Yeah, great.
Well, everybody should know that this was released earlier this year. It's a compilation of those 3 albums, and it's just fantastic material. Highly recommended. Kind of ahead of their time. You guys didn't have the commercial success, but some great music.
Unfortunately, listen, as I tell Maxayn, I call her P. That's her real name. Her name is Paulette. Her real name is Paulette. All right, Paulette Parker, but call her P. And in speaking to her about that, that was her baby as far as getting that together. And I was telling her, one of the things that makes Maxayn a plus, we were ahead of our time electronically because of our instrumentation. We were using Moogs, clavinets, ring modulators, wah-wah pedals, phase shifters. We were using all of that kind of shit that everybody else wasn't, you dig? And so everybody else finally eventually caught up to us in terms of what they started to do as far as production. We had been doing it in the beginning because we, as I said, we prided ourselves on being one of the first electronic bands you know, like slide them and all. As I said, we were electronic, and everything that was new electronic, we were into it. You know, I used my Andre Lewis and Marlo Henderson. I used to call them spacemen because they were always on the cutting edge of all of the electronic stuff for keyboards and guitars. All right, for string instruments and keyboards. So, and I think consequently because of that, our sound was different than everybody else's because it was, as I said, with the electronic, it was the digital thing coming. And also, that sound is what attracted Johnny Guitar Watson. That's why Watson came and found us, because of how we sounded and how Emry Thomas was playing them funky ass drums.
I want to let people know that that first record was in 1972 with Maxayn. So give everybody a frame of reference about what time we're talking about.
Yes, yes. Well, you know, as I said, I got the deal in '71, and we formed a group up in San Diego. We were involved as a group of a house that was called Earth, and Earth was owned by people that were managers at that particular time. A guy named Marty Silver, and they had a bowling alley in Mission Beach, San Diego, that they had transformed into this incredible concert hall. And they were ahead of their times also because they were into the health foods and stuff, you know, tie-dye shirts, health food, health malts, health bread muffins, all of that kind of stuff. You know, they were doing that, as I said, back in the early '70s. All right. And as I said, we were part of that, you know, the West Coast tie-dye beach thing, you dig? Mm-hmm. And as I said, we were the house band for the house was called Earth, and we worked with Elvin Bishop, Taj Mahal, who else? Dr. John, and some others. But like I said, we were the opening act for those acts at Earth. And as I said, that's 1971. 1970. By 1972, we had moved to Hollywood. You dig? And we were living in the Hollywood Hills.
Was Paulette part of it when you were the backing band?
Yes, yes, yes. And that's like me and Paulette met for the first time in July 1971 in Denver, Colorado. We had never met, but we kind of knew who each other were because we ran into each other. We're both heading west, in other words, coming to be a part of that group, but we had never met. But in the airport in Colorado, we ran into each other. We just kind of just knew that we were supposed to be together. You did. She kind of looked like my sister, as a matter of fact. But as I said, we met in the airport, and from that point on, we were together, you know, for the next couple of years as far as that group.
You know, before I forgot to mention, E.T., I want to let you know that I'm also an Aquarius.
You see that what I'm talking about? You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Listen, as I said, one of my friends told me, he said, the circles are beginning to touch, Scott. That's really wild, man. That's a boy. That fucks with me, buddy. Well, you know, in a positive way, but that's a plus, pal. Cause like I say, my musical career has been touched and been driven by Aquarius personalities. As I said, my uncle, all right, my music teacher, all right, Johnny Guitar Watson, all right, Maxayn, all right.
Wow.
My boss here at the Fowler Museum, Dr. Marla Burns, all right? And now you.
That's funny because I don't even run into that many Aquariuses, really.
Well, as I said, the water sign, I got to have that water, so guess what? And as I said, you just like I say, you just confirm what I'm saying, man. Aquarius individuals have been very instrumental in my life and my musical career, honest to God. Like I say,
I'm glad to be able to help continue that legacy.
Well, as I said, but that's a good sign. Well, it's a good sign. It's a damn good sign, brother. You know, for real.
So E.T., tell me about. You said you guys experiment with a lot of instrumentation that was new, but she could blow too. I mean, right?
She had been the opening act for Bobby Bland. You know, that's the way she came from. And she was also an Ike Tina Turner. That's where she had just left to become Maxayn. She had been with Ike and Tina Turner.
So how frustrated were you that you know, those records and songs didn't catch on more at that time? Were you feeling frustrated, or were you just glad to be making them?
Initially, I was glad to be a recording artist. And the deal was, now, in retrospect, now I feel that we could have probably been a bit more successful had my producer, Andre Lewis, our producer, was searching for something. He was searching for something that didn't exist. In his efforts to, shall we say, cross over and look for an identity that would give us, say some separation from other acts, it was like he was missing the point, all right? And we're looking for something that didn't exist when he should have been like right straight down the line with R&B, with funk, you know? And it's like, but as I say, he was looking for a pop kind of a sound, all right? And also, it's like, I truly believe that had Andre not been trying to say, distinguish us and create, say, some kind of separation as far as other acts, you dig, we probably could have been successful. But also, you have to take under consideration, also at that particular time, we were one of the only black bands with Capricorn Records at that time. And also, Capricorn Records had the hottest rock and roll band in the world.
The Allman Brothers.
Yes, sir. So they really didn't have a lot of attention for this little black band that they had. They loved Maxayn, but the focal point was the hottest rock and roll band in the world. Greg Allman there was kicking asses and taking names.
Did they ever let you open for them?
No, but see that could have been something that could have been probably maybe a plus for us if something like that had been done. But like I say, that wasn't the deal. But as I said, who knows if we'd had the right kind of representation that could have say brought that kind of concept or those kind of ideas, maybe. As a matter of fact, that probably would have been perfect, you know, for us to say get off the ground had we been able to be an opening act for the Allman Brothers.
You look at it time-wise, you guys were actually a year or two ahead of like a Rufus and Shaka Khan. They hit it so big.
Exactly.
You know?
The right label. You know, and as I said, Capricorn just didn't, they were new at dealing with black acts. You know, maybe if they had a little bit more experience, maybe. You know, because maybe they could have, say, taken that advantage that Rufus them did. You know, because Rufus them, same concept, pretty much the same concept. But yeah, they had a better deal, better promotion, better label.
Of course, they also got Stevie Wonder to write a song or two for them.
That too. But see,
so tell me then how Johnny Guitar came to, you know, hear you guys, and how that relationship got together.
Well, as I said, working in the group Maxayn, one of the things that we had going for us is we were of a different generation. We were the generation that came up in the Motown era, and so we were motivated a lot differently than, say, Johnny Watson and his generation. All right, we were motivated because of Barry Gordy, who owned Motown. So wow, we wanted to own Motowns too. We wanted to own record companies and studios too, because we saw that was feasible, that was a possibility. Whereas that wasn't something I'm sure that Watson and prior to us, they didn't see things like that, because it was a different world. All right, but as I said, we saw that aspect of the industry. We wanted to say be writers, we wanted to be producers, and we wanted to own the studio. We said we wanted to seize the means of production, which was not only did we want to rent the studio, we wanted to own them bad boys. So we had a different outlook. All right, and because of that, we worked as the group Maxayn, but we also had a group. We had a production company called Super Groove Music. All right. And Andre was the lead producer. I was a producer, writer. Maxayn, producer, writer. We all producer, writers. You did on the Super Groove. And for Super Groove, we work with Watson. We work with Betty Everett. We work with Patti LaBelle. We work with a guy named Frankie Lee, Little Frankie Lee. You did. And as I said, when we weren't gigging, that's how we supplemented our income as that production company, working and recording with other acts. All right. Now,
let me just interrupt you for a moment, E.T. I just want to let the folks know that at that time, this is like 73 or so, Johnny Guitar Watson actually had been out of recording for like 6 years,
Absolutely.
like that.
MIA.
And then he came back on Fantasy and got with you guys. So go on.
He came back on Fantasy, and the deal was, as I said, working as Supergroove, Andre and Watson hooked up. I can't give you any particular now, but Watson became connected with Andre. Andre brought Watson home. We're living in the Hollywood Hills, and that's when I was introduced to Johnny Guitar Watson. And Johnny Guitar Watson had contracted Supergroove to work on his next project, which was Listen for Fantasy Records.
What did you think of him just when you first met him?
Johnny Watson was a legend, Scott. Johnny Watson was a legend because I come from Texas. Johnny Watson came from Texas. Johnny Watson was one of the musicians that as a young 13, 14-year-old kid, he was the guy that we were hearing about in Houston. Gatemouth Brown, Albert Collins, Albert King, well, but all of those old blues guys, they were the blues scene in Houston. And Johnny Watson was one of the young lions. All right. Now, Johnny Watson was, as I said, he was a part of the clique that was going on in Houston. I'm in Galveston and in Texas City, which is about 35 miles from Houston. But as far as the music scene, that was the music scene, and Johnny Watson was a part of that. Now, Watson left Houston in like 1950. You know, I was 1 year old. He's like 14, 15 years of age. All right. But as I said, I grew up knowing about Johnny Watson because Johnny Watson was one of the Houston blues guys. You know, little Johnny Guitar, little Johnny Watson. You know, that's how I knew about him. But then, as I said, once we were introduced to each other, it was like a perfect marriage because, hey, Johnny Watson from Houston, Emry Thomas from Galveston. We're both Texans. We both play a Texas blues. And when we played the blues, guess what, boy? It was a whole nother, that's one of the key things. But boy, we could play the blues, boy. Me and Guitar Watson could play the blues. And see, one of the things that Johnny Watson lost, and what led to the end of our relationship was he lost the reality. Listen, between Johnny Guitar Watson and Emry Thomas, we were self-contained. We were self-contained. Just 1 second. All right. We were self-contained. All right. And the deal is, between myself and Johnny Watson, we could produce music. Just Johnny Watson and Emry Thomas. One of the keys to record production is drums and bass. My production company is called Bottom Band Production. That's why, because I learned through the process of learning the business and working and sessioning and all, one of the keys to making a record is the drum sound and the bass sound. That's why these assholes, these rapper guys are making all of the money that they're making, is because they have a drum machine. The drum machine gives them a foundation and a bass to be able to do what it is that they do. A beat and some words, which is what drives what they're doing. They're very successful at it, but if they didn't have a beat, a drum machine, they couldn't have achieved what they've achieved. So, as I said, because of the drums and because Johnny Watson was a keyboard player, and as I said, at that particular time, the transition from, say, the instruments were like turning into keyboards, triggered all kinds of things. Horn sounds, guitar sounds, you dig? All kinds of sounds were being triggered from a keyboard. And that was the deal. That was the key between Johnny Watson and I. Johnny Watson played keyboards, and because of the technology, Watson and I could produce an album in a week. That's what was so special about us.
But with Lewis and those guys, you were on like 2 of his records, right? On Fantasy, and then before he made the jump.
As a matter of fact, that's how we were working. As I said, Supergroove was hired by Watson to do that project with Fantasy. All right, Listen and The Lone Stranger. And as I said, he hired us to do those records. As I said, he hired that production company to do his music. All right.
So
Now,
that last one, The Lone Stranger, was kind of a bridge, sound wise too, sort of transitioning him from like R&B blues a little bit toward funk, and then
see, now listen, I believe listen, he was growing. This is my belief. He had been off, say, through hiatus, all right, and he was coming back, and he was reorienting himself to what was actually going on. So he was growing. That first record, listen, he had been out, okay? He was writing a certain way because he had just gotten back, all right? Now, Johnny Watson was getting more confident, you dig? And to the extent that when he did The Lone Stranger, he was confident enough to say that, hey, this is going to be a hit record, E.T. And it was, all right? He called it, all right? And ain't that a bitch? He called it, Scott. He said, E.T., this is going to be a hit record. You dig it?
how did he also develop? He changed, his style visually with the cowboy hats and the
Well,
the
as I said, the deal was Watson had always, shall we say, reinvented himself as far through the years and all being a blues guy. But the deal, he came back as a funketeer. You dig it? And so, in other words, I'm a funketeer. That's my generation. George Clinton, them. All right. So he came to my space. All right. He came to get what I had, which was funk. And as a matter of fact, Johnny Watson was, oh man, he was a gangster funker. As a matter of fact, he was a master blues guy, incredible funketeer. He played incredible funk. And as I said, come on, blues and funk is hand in glove, And that was the thing that gave him his identity, man. Don't nobody sound like Johnny Guitar Watson. I mean, guitar wise, vocal wise, don't nobody sound like Johnny Guitar.
No,
To this
that's for
day.
sure. That's for sure. But I mean, highly unusual, ET, for somebody like, 20 years after they did their first record that was a hit to completely reinvent themselves like that.
Well, and as I say, Watson was one of those kind of, come on, you Aquarius ass. Soul speak the Aquarius 50 years from now. He was always ahead and abreast of shit. You did, and you wouldn't even know how and why, because as I said, because characteristically you guys, Aquarius individuals, they tend to see ahead. You did, and I have to give him that because on numerous occasions he demonstrated that ability to me. Like, wow, how the fuck did he know that? He was that kind of an individual, man. He knew certain things. Matter of fact, man, Watson used to tell me things about drums that didn't hit me until like 30, 40 years later. I said, damn, because in the process of me learning and honing my skills, I came to I learned something. And then I said, damn, Watson told me that 30 years ago. But he told it to me in a different context. Johnny Watson played drums. Johnny Watson played jazz drums. He didn't play funk drums. He played jazz drums. So a lot of the things that he was talking to me about, he was talking from a jazz concept, you dig? And to the extent that it was going over my head because I'm a funketeer. And I said, what the fuck are they talking about? But as I evolved, learning to play the instrument better and playing jazz, then I began to hear some of the things that he had told me years before. I said, how the fuck did he? Don't forget, don't forget about the dick hang bang. I said, huh? Don't forget about your dick hang bang. Your titty hang, dang, tang, titty hang, dang, tang, 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 titty hang. Let the titty hang, titty hang, titty hang. That's dotted eight. No, titty hang, titty hang, titty hang, titty hang. He talking about let the titty hang. But that was the way that he used to learn. He had hooks and ways that he was express himself and say things. And not only him, but a lot of the old school guys. And they would sing things the same way. Like I say, that's dotted eight and that titty hang, titty hang, titty hang, dang, tang, titty hang. Eight notes, dang, tang, tang, titty hang, titty hang, dang, tang, titty hang, dang, tang, titty hang. Dotted eight notes, 8 notes. You did? But that's how he described it. And don't forget about your dick hang bang. Bop, boom, back, boom, back, the block, boom. Dick hang bang, right back on the beat. Dick hang bang, like a triplet, right back on the beat. And as I said, but those are things the jazz guys knew. You did? Funk guys, you funk guys, you play in a locked in pattern, so you don't really sway from that locked in pattern pretty much. But jazz, breathes. You dig? It has openings. It has spots where there's no music at all. It flows. You dig? So jazz has dynamics. It goes up, it goes down, and also music is played that way. But funk is pretty much a lock, set beat, and that's pretty much a lock. You dig? And once you commit to that, that's basically what you'll be playing, beginning, middle, and end. It's that. Jazz can flow. You dig? And consequently, it has different dynamics, as a matter of fact. And as I said, and Watson knew about those dynamics, because Watson had been a jazz musician. He had, as a matter of fact, he had a jazz album playing jazz piano, as a matter of fact, jazz piano with bass and drums.
But he was all self-taught?
He's also, excuse me?
What was he all self-taught?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's the deal. Like I tell folks, listen, Johnny Watson was a genius. All right, Johnny Watson was a genius because Johnny Watson played piano. You know about piano? Piano is a lazy instrument. It don't just play. You got to play that bad boy. You really have to play that instrument. All right. Johnny Watson was a self-taught instrumentalist. All right. I think his grandfather gave him a guitar and all, but the deal was his first instrument was piano. All right. Johnny Watson could play Oscar Peterson compositions verbatim. All right. Oh, you don't think that that's a sign of genius? If you know anything about music, if you know who Oscar Peterson was, and Johnny Watson could play Johnny Watson could play compositions by Oscar, you dig? He said, no shit. That's how he used to impress us when he used to come up to the house with Maxayn, because we had a piano up there, right? He'd come up and he'd rock the box on their ass, you dig? Playing Oscar shit.
Wow.
But that was him impressing us, like, in other words, hey, I'm a badass. I don't just only play the blues, I play this piano. You dig? And as I said, he would come up and hang out, and he'd be playing the piano, maybe he'd be playing the dog shit out the piano, and that's the deal. His main instrument is piano. And I think that's probably why Mr. Watson doesn't get his props. You dig? Watson doesn't get his props among a lot of the true guitarists. Like, for instance, I have a rapport with Dr. Kenny Burrell here at UCLA. And when I was telling them about our work with Watson, they don't see, it's like, because these are, say, gorilla guitarists, Kenny Burrell, a legend, and they play the instrument a certain way. And I think because Watson played the guitar a certain way, they didn't give him his prop, because guitar used the cheetah bar. You use that clamp. You dig? And most guitarists like Kenny Burrell, they don't smile on that shit. You dig? You ain't no real guitarist if you're using that bar, in other words. You dig?
Well, Albert Collins did too.
Okay, but we're talking about, listen, that's cool among that musician, that blues musician, because you say that's the norm. I agree. But when you're talking about people like Kenny Burrell, guess what? They ain't playing with no clamp, Scott. You dig? And they ain't playing those just singing notes. They playing notes, they playing chords, and they are wearing your ass out. We're talking about Kenny Burrell's, Wes Montgomery's, and all that kind of shit, all right? As I said, yeah, them blues guys, B.B. King, yeah, they didn't get away with that, put a clamp, I don't think BB didn't play with no clamp, but as I said, many of them did, and like I said, but it was sufficient for them to play the blues. That's the deal. They wasn't playing giant steps. You did. Come on. And as I said, but Watson prided himself on being a jazz musician.